Welcome to the Indie Opera Podcast.
On this episode of the Indie Opera Podcast, we have a discussion with Matthew Aucoin and Sarah Ruhl about their opera Eurydice, which will be at the Metropolitan Opera starting November 23rd, followed by a lively discussion of what's new in opera with Peter, Brooke, and Walker.
Welcome to the Indie Opera Podcast. This is Peter.
This is Brooke.
This is Walker.
And joining us today are two MacArthur Genius Award recipients, playwright and librettist Sarah Ruhl, and composer, conductor, writer, and pianist Matthew Aucoin. He is both artist in residence at Los Angeles Opera and co-artistic director of the American Modern Opera Company. Their opera, Eurydice, which premiered at Los Angeles Opera in February 2020, will have its Metropolitan Opera premiere on November 23rd. It's just a month away. Very exciting. So welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much.
So Matthew, you were on the show once before in a very different environment. We were in a studio, but now we're on Zoom. So
No, we were such risk takers in those days.
And Sarah, it is so exciting to have you. Just having a playwright of your caliber on here is amazing on its own, but also to have such an interesting opera going on. Now, I'm going to start asking you, because the play existed well before your collaboration on the opera. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about this project and why you would want to write a Greek story, an ancient Greek story, and write it in the way you did, because it's such an interesting telling of the story.
I think mythology is such an incredible vehicle because it's bigger than you, it's more ancient than you know how it ends. So that also takes some anxiety away from writing. And I was always fascinated by the myth and the idea of losing something just through one gesture. You know, I'd written the play, I think when I was 25. Although I'm bad with time. So, you know, a good 20 years ago, around the same age I think Matt was when he approached me about writing a libretto for an Orpheus cycle or an Orpheus opera. And I had said, oh, well, I already wrote this play Eurydice, but I'd love to do that with you. And then we were off to the races.
And Matthew, how did this collaboration work? Was it your idea to work with Sarah, or was there some overarching organization that said, hey, why don't you two work together?
Well, I already had the same kind of Orphic obsession that many composers from, Monteverdi through Harrison Birtwistle have had. I mean, I think it's one of those myths that, like in the words of my teacher Jory Graham, is always happening in our psyche. It didn't happen long ago. It's happening now. And we've all been there. And also, musicians are attracted to it because it sort of glorifies music. But also, I think it doesn't do so in a naive way. It kind of says music can conquer death, but humans are going to screw it up. We're not worthy of music somehow. Music is both human and more than human. So I was totally obsessed with the story, and I'd written a short piece called The Orphic Event for Anthony Roth Costanzo, and felt that there was room to expand on it. But through talking with Sarah, and I was connected to Sarah both through my younger sister Christine, who knows the world of contemporary theater better than I do, and also Andre Bishop at Lincoln Center Theater, which is partnered with the Met in their commissioning program. And when I said, gosh, I really want to do something more with our pal Orpheus, the next words out of his mouth were Sarah Ruhl. You have to work with Sarah Ruhl. So yeah, we got together, and I think pretty quickly the idea evolved from being, at least in my mind, it evolved from being an expansion of Orphic Moment into a fairly straightforward adaptation of Eurydice, because I found the play so musical and so affecting, and in a way so far from my original idea of it. I came to love the idea that I was engaging with an otherness. It was not just like wallowing in my own dark take on.
What do you mean by that it's always happening, that it's happening now?
I mean that the really great myths, they're obviously not to be taken literally, they're archetypes of aspects of our psyches or situations that anyone can find themselves in. So I guess what I mean when I say they're always happening is, I think probably each of us has been Orpheus in the sense of you do the one thing you know you shouldn't, but you do anyway, and then you feel total loss. And you've also probably had that done to you. And I think myths are these stories that distill these like psychic gestures to their essence, you know? And of course, there's probably a lot of attempted myths that didn't stay around, but the ones that have lasted because they just resonate.
So when you first read Sarah's script, it's kind of a shock, right? It's this modern, almost 1950s. There's quotes from the Andrews sisters. How did it take you by surprise, or what was it? What you were expecting, or what did you think?
Well, I mean, I wept, as I think everyone who experiences the play does. I found it so moving. But also, I think part of what took my breath away was, and Sarah can disagree with me, but I don't think the core of the play is that it's the Orpheus story. I think it's kind of a different journey. It's more about, you know, she's named Eurydice, and it is the character of Eurydice, but also it's someone else. There's the relationship with the father is a different story. And the piling on of catastrophe at the end when there's loss after loss, that's nowhere in the myth. So I think what really excited me was, no, this is a different story. And we could really make something special out of that as an opera.
And Sarah, I love that how I read the script, and actually after our first interview with you, Matt, I went to a bookstore and I found the script and I read it in the bookstore, but I just read it again yesterday, and it's really lovely.
Pay for it, Peter.
Yeah, it was the playwrights. What was that bookstore? And there was like
the drama bookshop.
Yeah, but it's no longer there.
But it moved, and now there's a wonderful new one. Lin-Manuel Miranda saved it, and
wow.
now exists again. You can go.
That's great.
Well, then I'll go and read books there too. But I really love the idea of the father and the incorporating the father sort of reaching out with a letter. I don't know the original story well enough to know, you know, if that was a part of it, but I just love how you develop the father character and actually how the father grows and changes. It's almost like he's the main character, and I love bringing that into the story. Tell me a little bit about how you thought about the story and how you thought about what the central characters were.
So there was no father in the original. I mean, it's interesting. We just also have these scraps, you know, from Ovid and Virgil. And I think there was a tragedy based on this myth, but it was lost. So in a way that gives one wonderful permission. And to me, it stood to reason that if I really wanted to follow Eurydice's optic, which meant following her to the underworld. And it seemed to me that it stood to reason that she meet an ancestor there. And I really wanted to explore the relationship between language and music and language and memory. And I had lost my own father when I was 20 to cancer. I was really close with him. So I think I wrote this play in many ways to expiate that grief. So again, the Greek mythology becomes this very helpful container or mirror for grief that was personal, and for fragments of stories that were specific to me, but hopefully another person could project their own intimate loss onto.
I really appreciated, I haven't read the libretto or the play, but I did read the synopsis, and I really appreciate that Eurydice is given a perspective of any kind, because often she doesn't have one. She's just the object of Orpheus's affections. And so, you know, it's nice as a woman to have have the female character actually have some independence and thought of her own. that's a nice diversion.
Yeah, she's usually a cipher. I mean, she's a muse, she's a beloved, she's an object of loss.
Mhm.
And I think there were two poems I love that managed to give her some sense of subjectivity or selfhood. And one is a Rilke poem, and the other is by H.D. And I feel like they gesture towards, oh, this person who is lost might be a thinking, feeling person. And I wanted to go further.
Were you influenced by all of the many, interpretations of this story? I mean, there's film adaptations, there's operas, there's did you go through all of those methodically, or did you?
Not methodically. I mean, I tend to do a deep dive and then try to forget, like I read the Ennui, I read the Cocteau, I did all the, I read the Virgil, and then I tried to forget about all of it. And I don't know if it's the same for you, Matt. I mean, were you careful to stay away from operatic treatments of the myth, or did you do your research and then toss it? And what did you do?
I didn't do any research. I mean, I knew some of them. I've conducted the Gluck a number of times, but midway through composition, I sort of realized that this was not at its heart the Orpheus story. I really do believe Sarah has invented something that's, in a way, just as rich. So no, I didn't. But what's interesting is that I'm publishing a book about opera in December, and there is a big chapter about Orpheus and Eurydice operas. So the irony is, I did do a deep dive and did do a lot of research, but I did it after writing the opera.
That's probably just right. That's perfect.
It felt, because it was interesting having been through the experience myself to now say, oh, how did Philip Glass, or there are some that are really sensational that very few people know.
I don't know Philip Glass's.
He adapted the Cocteau film, and Charpentier's unfinished Descente d'Orphée aux Enfers from the 17th century is just a stunner. And Harrison Birtwistle's The Mask of Orpheus is like the craziest opera ever written. Literally, it's as ambitious as the Ring Cycle or Stockhausen's Licht or something. So yeah, it's really fertile terrain, but I'm glad I didn't do that before writing the piece.
How did you start to create the sound world of it? Because you could have gone in so many different directions.
There's a kind of emotional transparency to Sarah's work that I think invited an analogous transparency in mine. I didn't really think about it. I just felt it. I mean, I do think water is an essential motif in the play, the river of forgetfulness, the sense of things being kind of washed away, life itself in a way. That sounds a bit grim. So I knew there had to be all these watery sounds in the orchestra, bowed percussion, bowed vibraphone, and glockenspiel. The percussion, the piece is basically a percussion concerto. They have so much to do. The Met percussionists, are very excited. So somehow these very watery sounds felt essential. But I don't know, it was very instinctive. I just kind of dove in, and the music mostly wrote itself.
Well, there's a lot of music in the script itself. It feels it. I'm sure that if I were to have to perform this play, I'd have to score an entire background to go with it as well, because the music just runs through the whole thing. How much of, in your collaboration, how much did you hew to the script, or was there a lot of changing and going back and forth?
It's fairly intact. I'd say the biggest change is that it's distilled down, and it's longer in duration, but it's slimmer in terms of words. But it always was written in 3 movements, funnily enough. It always had a chorus of stones. So it was sort of prepared oddly for being an opera. We made a couple structural nips and tucks in the second movement. We added this idea of Orpheus having a double because Matt was really interested in the sound, partially, having a countertenor double who would be a more unearthly, immortal, almost androgynous part of Eurydice, of Orpheus. Been a long day. It's our first rehearsal today.
I'm going to find you. I play the saddest music now you're gone.
And we kind of diminished some of the role of Hades. Got a little trimmer. I think he became more Hades and less a kind of interesting man luring Eurydice down to the underworld.
Well, I love the idea of the double singers, the countertenor. We had John Holliday has been on our show, as well as Barry Banks has also been on our show. So they're both in the cast. So I don't think John's performing the night I'm going, but maybe I'll have to do a standing room to see John as well. An incredible singer, but also Jakob is an incredible singer. So I want to see both performances. Can you tell us? So you had your first rehearsal today? Was it just a table sit, or what were you doing?
It was a table sing, maybe. I mean, it wasn't literally the first rehearsal, but it was the first staging rehearsal, first one with singers. There were some very early orchestra, chorus, and also tech rehearsals. I mean, this is really a luxury of working at the Met is for new pieces, often there are these rehearsals a couple of months in advance, which I think of as sort of getting the orchestra to realize which parts are really hard and they have to go home and practice, which is great. And it's much harder when you only have, 10 days before opening night, as you do with some companies. But today was the first day we gathered the cast, and Yannick led the cast through the entire score, and Mary Zimmerman, our director, presented the production. So it was the first day of school vibes, I think.
So is this the same production concept-wise as Los Angeles, or is this a whole new conceptualization?
Same production.
Same production.
Yes. So today was really, it's always kind of this moment of well, this is where we stand. And I think it was a pretty thrilling day for a librettist and a composer. Erin Morley in the title role is just embodying the role. And I was saying to Sarah, she has this practically unique quality of being able to sing in the stratosphere while still sounding like a human being. It still sounds like she's talking to you somehow.
Yeah,
She's amazing.
Doesn't sound like a circus trick as it does with some sopranissime, but she's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, she's amazing. I love her singing.
She's virtuosic, and she's also quite humble, and it's a very beautiful combination. And yeah, I really kind of just put my head in my hands when she sang that aria. But out of I hoped I didn't look like I was like losing it, but I just had to cover my face when she was singing "This Is What It Is to Love an Artist," because it was so beautiful.
So did I know some productions when they go to the Met they rewrite things or whatever? Has there been any rewriting for this production, or is it the same score as Los Angeles?
Very minor tweaks. I mean, nothing that affected more than 10 or 20 seconds. A couple of things were scenic. There were a couple of scene transitions that were tricky, so I was happy to slightly extend the music. Little things like that. With my first full-scale opera, Crossing, which we talked about last time I was on this show, I rewrote it several times, wholesale. But the reason for that was mostly that I had screwed up the libretto. So it was really libretto issues that caused the rewrites. And I think that because Sarah's play was already so strong, I felt that I was working from very strong bones. And as a result, any changes were cosmetic.
And I think I changed like one line and maybe we brought one line back. Maybe we didn't. Did we bring back that line about potatoes sleeping in the dirt?
Bring back the line about potatoes.
Yes. So excited.
What has the process been like working with Mary?
Mary's been great. I feel like, it's like just keeps adding layers, and Mary was adding this dimension of, space and time and visual language. And she's quite a visual director. And I love that she always works with the same collaborators over time. So she has a real shorthand with them. So this designer, Dan Osling, I think is kind of amazing. And Anna, who did the costumes, she works with over and over again. So I think that's one thing that's nice, is it's the same designers from LA, same choreographer. So we're able to tweak things and sort of say, oh, maybe we'll take a new look at this moment in New York. And so many operas and plays don't get the luxury of a second production. And I think it's almost impossible to finish something in a first production, because you're just trying to birth it into being, and deal with the adrenaline of an opening night, much less kind of look at it and say, oh, what if we adjusted this or that?
Mary's also a creative artist who writes plays, and there's something kind of circular. I know that Sarah saw Mary's Metamorphoses.
Yeah.
Even before writing Eurydice, and so
that was amazing. I remember that. Yeah.
So the fact that had some impact maybe on the genesis of the play, so it's cool.
The other thing I loved about the script that I read is that parts of it seem clearly impossible. Raising people and walking in invisible places, and a house being built from string, and all these things seem kind of impossible. So is there anything about doing it at the Met where you're able to realize things that you haven't been able to realize before?
Well, one thing I love is Paula Vogel, who was my teacher, playwriting teacher, has an exercise which she gives, which is almost like a Zen koan, and it's write a play that's impossible to stage. And what you find out quickly is no matter how many impossible stage directions you write, it's always actually possible to stage them. Sometimes even with the more crude, simple way of doing it. Like I remember I did this play in Providence 20 years ago, and a RISD student was assigned to help with the design. And, there's this raining elevator, and the designer was sort of looking worried, saying, I think I can get someone from industrial design to help with the raining elevator. And I was like, no. We just need a light box, like a cue that's like, a square, and the sound of rain. And maybe if we're getting fancy, we could have a sieve and someone like pour a bucket of water down through it, And then you have the Met version, which really is, an elevator coming down, water. So certainly all of those things that and LA Opera has incredible resources too, but the scale of it is quite exciting.
Well, it is interesting because sometimes, it's sometimes it's hard to tell which is more effective, like you said, like to do it, in sort of like crude way, like with almost like with puppets or or as opposed to like industrial light and magic, Hollywood, pull out all the stops. So yeah, it's I guess at the Met they generally go for actually doing it, as realistically.
Twyla Tharp talks about this in her Creative Habit, her book. She talks about the worst thing she ever did was the thing where she had an unlimited budget. That the constraints of budget actually make for better art. Which is an interesting thing to think about, but being forced to be creative, I think, yields more interesting results a lot of the time.
And also,
how do you think the original play that you wrote, how has it changed in being morphed into an opera? Does it come across with different meanings or overtones than you originally imagined it?
It feels very true to the spirit of the original. And one thing that I think is amazing that Matt's done is kind of rhythmicize the language so that it's, for lack of a better term, actor proofed. In other words, with a play, how an actor delivers a line, really, either they make the line sing or not, but when they have to do it in a certain rhythm, in a way, the casting becomes less and the process becomes less important because it's right there in the musical text, the emotional life of the line.
Rhythms, Sarah, for your future plays, like, so you can just give the actors this is the rhythm. Can you
clap it out?
Yeah.
You were about to say something earlier, Matt. Were you about to say something about scenic design or?
Oh, related, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I like, Peter, that you said there are all these things that are impossible. And, my book about opera is called The Impossible Art.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Impossibility is kind of intrinsic to the art form. But it also, I was thinking that one of the things that attracted me to your work, Sarah, was, I guess I might call it magical realism. There are things that happen in your plays, not just Eurydice, but a character might become so depressed that they turn into an almond, or a person might drag a giant yew tree across North America to show how much they love their dying partner. These things happen that are magical, but they're also they somehow don't break the fabric of the play because like the conditions had been set for that to be possible. And I think that's really good for opera, because in opera you're always in kind of a dream world because everyone's singing. There's no such thing as realism in opera. You want things to happen that are a little bit heightened or dreamlike or magical because it's the nature of the art form. That's what came to my mind.
And it might make me addicted to opera. Who knows? I mean,
you're last.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that it sounds like your play, you didn't have to cut that much from the play to make it work as a libretto?
Not really, no. I mean, it seems like you have to cut 1 out of every 5 words or something, right? Just to make it singable within what does it run? 2 hours and a bit? 2 hours and some change.
That's really interesting, because I worked with, recently I was working with some they were composers and librettists at NYU who were learning how to write opera. And that was really, really hard for them. They just kept wanting to write, very standard dialogue. And they loved being wordy, and all of their humor came from just pouring more words and more words and more words. And it was really hard for them to understand that less is more, that the composer has to take over at some point and do something, and they can only use so many words, so it's interesting that it seems like you were naturally drawn toward that concept.
Well, I think one thing that's interesting is that both Matt and I I don't know if you describe yourself as a secret poet, Matt, or I started in poetry and then moved into playwriting. And I think with poetry, you have that minimalism in terms of your canvas, and you're well aware that cutting 2 or 3 lines can make a substantial difference rather than being additive. So the older I get, the fewer words I'm drawn to. And I've been working on a book of haiku over the pandemic. I was writing 1 haiku a day during quarantine just to stay sane. So I'm always happy to cut and irritated if someone says I must add something. So that's lucky for me with this process.
So it was a process of cutting things, which I think is interesting. Often you'll open a libretto or think about setting a libretto, and the words just don't seem like they're singable. But it seemed that your play was singable. And did melodies just instantly jump out to you, Matthew, or how did that process come to you?
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely gave Sarah a call because I felt it was already singing to me. I wouldn't have reached out if I didn't feel that. I don't know. I've thought of it a little bit like testing the acoustic of a room, with a text. You sort of tap it and see if it resonates, and Sarah's texts resonate. I'm not. It's a mysterious thing. The short answer is yes. I could tell kind of from the beginning, and it has something to do with, I think, the fact that as you were just saying, Sarah, your prior experience had been in poetry, because there's a slightly heightened musicality to the way the characters communicate that felt like it was already a libretto. Yeah.
Right, it's not realism. It's funny. I have this little poem on my desk that this I used to teach poetry in the schools, and this this little kid Patrick from Queens wrote. I gave them like an Ars Poetica where they had to write what a poem is, and he said, "Try to sing while you think. A poem is not so hard if you sing and think." And I thought it was so perfect that I put it on my desk, and I think that's where I come to. That's what I come to a play with. So I think it's probably not dissimilar from a composer, like try to sing while you think. Um, and sometimes Matt would call me from Vermont, where I picture this really beautiful rustic barn. I've never visited, but I have an image in my mind of Matt calling, from a field, being like, "I'm on this scene. I just need a little something or a little clue here or there." And I would say something that I didn't think was that interesting. And I'd be, oh, okay, I've got it. And then I just imagine, all these melodies pouring into his head like Orpheus, and he just run and write them down.
That it was like make a couple little tweaks to the scene as it was in the play, and then I would usually get stuck once and give you a call, and inevitably you said something that unlocked something, and that was that.
So do you quote the Andrews Sisters in your score? So Sit Under the Apple
I think
Tree.
we chucked that, right? Kind of chucked that reference.
Yeah, I think the irony is the most of the overtly musical things in the play got changed and everything else stayed.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
That's so funny because when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, I see the music already.
Well, that's the problem.
Right.
My job is to write new music.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's also that challenge of Orpheus teaches Eurydice a melody in the script. Did you keep that element where she?
It's also cut. Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
That is unbelievable because that seems so central to the thing. That's really interesting. Why did that get cut?
Because it doesn't make sense. Everyone is singing already. I mean, you want Erin Morley to stand on the stage of the Met and be like, "I don't know how to sing." I mean, it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
Like you would have to mimic bad singing for 10 seconds or something. I just couldn't find a way to do it. And that felt.
Haven't you seen Meistersinger? Or, I mean,
it is there in Meistersinger. But I think Wagner's going for something kind of grotesque in those moments that I don't know. I felt like it would be the wrong kind of suspension of disbelief.
Right. Because everything's already singing and in music, we in a way had to take out references to now there will be music because there's already music.
You guys both have books coming out or just recently come out. You have one in December, Matthew, and Sarah Smile is out.
It's out. I can show you.
Oh, yay. Okay, wonderful.
So my book is sort of a memoir of the last 10 years of my life. I had gotten a paralysis of the 7th cranial nerve, which is called Bell's palsy, after I gave birth to twins. So this side of my face was paralyzed, and most people recover really quickly, but mine was like a very slow incremental progress. And so the book is kind of a meditation on that, on what it's like to not be able to smile, and motherhood and balancing motherhood and art making.
My first Broadway play was supposed to go into rehearsal that fall. I was not only pregnant, I was extra pregnant. What luck, what abundance, all this bounty. Why am I not happy, I thought. And my mind went back to the fortune cookie. Deliver what is inside you, and it will save your life. Did it mean that my life was imperiled, and if I didn't deliver the baby speedily, the pregnancy itself would kill me? Or did it mean something more metaphysical? All through the pregnancy, I thought, how could my children possibly save my life? It would take me a decade to find out.
I love that the audiobook is out and that you're the one who reads it, because the author doesn't always read their stories.
I liked it. It was like story time with myself. It's like, and I recorded it in Evanston, which is where I'm from, and funnily where Mary Zimmerman's from, and this little studio. And there was something sweet about telling your story out loud from start to finish in 3 days and then being done. And of course, I had to work on things like mouth sounds, which, since I'm not an actor, I was like, oh my God, what are mouth sounds? And they were like, eat a green apple so you don't have mouth sounds.
It was interesting when you said, when you wrote that you were worried that you wouldn't be able to write ever again after we're having twins. How did that play out? Was it difficult to get back into writing after having twins?
It was quite difficult, to be honest with you. I mean, I think when I had one child, my older daughter, Anna, I had sort of figured out, oh, I can write when she's napping. I can, and with twins, like there was a level of physical chaos and exhaustion that, for the first 2 or 3 years, I wrote, I think it more in short form. So I wrote a book of essays called 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write, which were like these little distillations. And then, I finally started writing in long form again and writing full-length plays again. But I think it was only once they started going to kindergarten that I felt like I could actually think, from 9 to 3.
Three kids is tough. I have 2 kids.
You do.
One of them is in kindergarten, but the other one is 2, and it's definitely kindergarten is a kind of a bit of a relief.
It's a bit of like get your mind back.
Are you going to record an audiobook?
Well, I think if we do, we'll have to include a lot of musical excerpts also.
Right.
So it may be a little bit of a complicated endeavor, but we probably will.
Yeah.
I mean, my book is called The Impossible Art Adventures in Opera, and it's basically a love letter to opera at its best. Really, it's a book of essays. My publisher doesn't want me to say that because I guess books of essays don't sell.
Yeah,
I love essays
me
myself.
too. It's so irritating. Come on, sell an essay book, buy an essay book.
It's about tons of favorite operas from across the centuries. And, I hope that a lot of musicians and opera lovers find the book, but I also hope a lot of people who don't love the art form also do, because I want it to also be a way in. And there is a chapter also about the development of Eurydice. But yeah, I read about everybody from, Verdi and Mozart to Chaya Chernovin and Thomas Ades and other people doing amazing work out there today. And it was a pandemic project. I wrote it when everything got canceled, and I felt like, well, I feel so distant from this art form that I'm usually engaged in every day. So it was a way of staying connected.
I appreciated the article on Thomas Ades, who I'm completely conflicted on. So it's great to hear your feelings, especially as a composer, and how composers feel about him.
What are your conflicts?
Oh, I just don't know if I love him or hate him. I mean, I both love him. I saw Exterminating Angel twice. All right, so because I didn't know if I liked it or hated it. It's such a wonderful piece, and it's horrible.
I think the first time you hated it.
Well,
did you love it the second time?
It's just, well, it's more, actually, it's a much deeper question about what are we, are we here? Are we making art? Are we telling stories? What is it that we're doing here? And part of me is also like, why is this audience so into this when I think they're into it because they think it's cool. Like there's all these other layers that were going, through my head. Like are they liking this because they were told to like it by the New York Times? Or, I had all these cool things going on in my head about it. I love the film. I wasn't sure what to think about it, which is great because it's not a black and white thing. It's a gray thing, which made me think about it even more. So with distance, as the further away I get from it, the more I like it, because it sort of reconceptualized a lot of things in my brain about what opera can and should be. So I think it's great. I don't know if I liked it.
I think I'm attracted to artists who kind of walk the tightrope between, or rather, how should I put it? Artists who kind of obliterate the distinction between high art, whatever that is, and like entertainment. Like I think Stravinsky walked that tightrope really well, where it's like, who cares? It's the Rake's Progress or the Rite of Spring. Like it is in such bad taste in one way, and it is also the greatest thing ever in another way. And I sort of think Tom Ades is kind of walking that tightrope in a cool way. But I think because it's a tightrope, people feel conflicted about it. I think it's a good sign personally.
Well, I just also feel like his characters are like 2 million miles away from me. Like I don't feel like they just seem like they're being held away from me as like these, like veils, So, and I love something about opera that sort of touches my soul on a human level, because it can really convey emotional impact directly to someone's soul without having to think quite so much. And with Ades, that's not what we're talking about. It's not, to me, it doesn't hit me in the same way. I loved The Tempest too. I saw it on Halloween, after the hurricane at Sandy. It was the Met reopened with that, which is incredibly ironic. But so I don't, it's just made me think.
Well, we're aiming for the soul.
You're aiming for,
we're aiming for the soul. It's true. And I like hearing you say that, because I think sometimes it's not fashionable to talk about the soul in contemporary art practice. And I think maybe if you're someone who loves the ancients, you feel like you can discuss the soul with some, I don't know, authority. But
you're right. I mean, I feel like it's more like theater. Often, I'm a director myself. I often feel like theater gets closer, or is willing to go face to face with the soul, or with talking about emotion sometimes, than opera. Strangely enough, I mean, even though singing will take it into an emotional place and take it to a very high stakes, intense emotional place, but it is easy for composers to just take it so far away from us that we aren't connected to it anymore. So it's just interesting which way people go. I mean, it seems like several of the modern operas we've seen at the Met have gone in that direction, just more abstract, more distant. So it's nice. It's nice that you all are doing something that feels so close and so touching.
If they want to find out more about you, Sarah, where should they find you? And of course, they should buy your book.
Oh, you can buy my book, Smile, if you wish. You could lurk on my website if you wish. It's sarahruhlplaywright.com. I sometimes use Instagram. And Matt, what about you?
Gosh, similar things. You if you like, you could buy my book, The Impossible Art. It's out for Art Strauss and Giroux.
What's the pub date, Matt?
December 7th.
Okay, great.
You order now, however. My website's MatthewAucoin.com. My social media drug of choice, I'm on there at Aucoin Composer. And of course, everyone should come see Eurydice by both Sarah and me at the Metropolitan Opera, November 23rd through December 16th. And if you don't live in New York, you can see the piece in HD on the afternoon of December 4th.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know they were doing that.
That's fantastic.
And before we go, like future projects, are you working on another opera? And Sarah, has this given you the opera bug?
Yeah, I might secretly be working on another opera. I can't talk about it yet. I'm working on a musical, which I'm waiting for it to be slotted. Matt, tell about what you're working on. Are you working on an opera?
Early stages. It's sort of too nascent to talk about, really. Yeah. But I'm writing a lot of chamber music, a lot of orchestral music. I just made a big orchestral suite from Eurydice for the Philadelphia Orchestra, which the wonderful Yannick will be doing in the spring.
Is there a recording of that yet, Matt?
Only like a robotic synthesis recording.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear it.
It'll come to New York in a few months. Yeah, I mean, I think the funny thing, Sarah and I have talked a little bit about this, but during the pandemic, we've both been a little bit adjacent to our usual practice, writing plays or operas, because it's just been difficult for places to say, yes, we will, commit to this gigantic in-person undertaking. So I think I'm still kind of in a slightly adjacent place, but I'll be back.
I feel that very deeply. This sort of like, I went last week to buy a bunch of tickets to just Broadway shows, and I was like, I feel like the life force is returning to me after just the ability to be able to even think about this stuff again feels like sort of a revelation in a way. And it's hard to make that shift because it's shut down so quickly that coming out of it is a challenge.
Yeah, it seemed like there were also a lot of projects that were slated that got canceled that may never get picked up, and I'm hoping our opera companies calling out now saying we now, new commissions. Do you hear that in the rumbling in the background of new commissions, or is there life happening out there?
There absolutely is.
There is. Awesome.
I can't be specific, but yes, there is.
So y'all can read between the lines. No, it's really, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think audiences are hungry for something new too. Everybody's been transformed by this experience, not necessarily for the better. And I think looking for something, a balm for the soul. You were talking about the soul earlier. I think it was everybody's vulnerabilities were sort of laid bare. And I think art that speaks to that experience is of high value and importance right now. So,
well, Matt and I were talking today on the first day about the fact that Eurydice at LA Opera was the last thing we did before shutdown, and Eurydice at the Met is the first thing we're doing opening up. And I think because the play is about grief and is about memory and in some ways about stasis, I think I hope it will connect, in a new way to people post-pandemic.
Well, I hope to. Are you going to be in the audience? I hope to run into you.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll be there December 8th.
Great.
I'll see you in the lobby. Thank you both for taking time off from what it sounds like it was an incredibly busy day for you both. A very exciting day for you both.
Yes.
I am zonked. I'm going to go right to bed.
Congratulations. That's really exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, see you soon, Matt.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
night.
Cultivate the arts of dancing and small talk. Everything in moderation. Put the companionship and respect of dogs. Take care to change the light bulbs. Continue to give yourself to others. For love is the ultimate satisfaction in life.
Do you want to talk about Fire Shut Up in My Bones?
So I went opening night, and it was very exciting to be there for that.
Is that the first time you've been to an opening night?
No, it wasn't
Really?
the first time I've been to an opening, but
What was it like?
well, I mean, it was, all the people all dressed up, and I dressed up, my friends dressed up, it was fun in that regard, but also, the audience was way more racially diverse than it normally is.
Absolutely.
I would
I'd
say
love
like
that.
30% of the audience was Black. And that's amazing. And the energy in the room was just extraordinary. People so excited to go in, people so excited to see this opera, people so excited to see their stories represented on stage. I was even actually listening to Terrence Blanchard being interviewed on NPR today. I don't know what I was listening to, and he was talking about the intentional representation of the Black American experience. Specifically, he was talking about the fraternity dance at the beginning of the second act. Is that second act?
Yeah.
And how when he was writing the opera to begin with, they wanted him to cut that part, and he said no, absolutely not. And when we saw it in the Met, they didn't want, like, it was when it was originally the original production.
But why?
They were looking to shorten the length of the show.
Oh, stupid.
And someone said, "Oh, well, you can cut that part," and he was like, "That is nope, cannot do that." And when that part happened, the audience just lost their minds.
Their minds exploded. I mean, for us too.
It was so good. It was so good. So I felt like the story, also as a person who I personally have struggled with my own mental health issues, and it was really nice to see a story about someone dealing with, sort of normal life trauma. I mean, there's also some exceptional life trauma, but there's also just like attachment trauma, and feeling like no one's paying enough attention to you, which certainly as a performer that's definitely a driving force. But I think like seeing that kind of storyline on stage felt like, this is a person and this is a struggle that I very personally deeply relate to. Even though his childhood was wildly different than mine, I think a lot of people know what it feels like to want more. And that's, it was nice to see that kind of story on stage. I felt like there should have been a trigger warning. Because I had not read the book. I was not prepared. And not that nothing was explicit in any way, but I was just like, man, if you're watching a TV show on Netflix now, if there's some even suggestion of childhood sexual assault, they tell you so that you're prepared. And I was like, part of, people were like, well, maybe it was in the program. And we got there early enough to get programs in advance, but we had to wait in line for COVID check and everything. By the time that we actually got to sit down, the national anthem was almost done playing. So they're so terrible at the Met. They won't give you a program when you enter. They won't give you a program till you get to your level, which is, I'm sorry, what? Just give people programs when they walk in the door, because then as they're standing in the elevator, they can look at it, right? So they wouldn't. We were sitting in a family circle. They wouldn't let us get whatever the next row down is. I can never remember. That person wouldn't give me a program, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. So I didn't even if I wanted to. There's gunshots and all this stuff. Like all that stuff's usually at least in the program. I didn't have a chance to read that. I'm sorry, that's not. Metropolitan Opera, you got to work on your hospitality. Like that is not okay.
So what was really shocking when there was a gunshot? It was just
the gunshots weren't so shocking. The childhood sexual assault.
Oh, the childhood.
I mean, we were in the family circle. A gunshot down that far away for me wouldn't have been upsetting, but I am also not triggered by gunshots. Before it starts, you could put additional text that gives you just a trigger warning
Yeah.
Yeah, it
people are
actually should
emotionally
be.
prepared.
It should be on the website, and it should be. I mean,
Yeah.
it should be
should be
before
on the
you buy your
ticket.
ticket.
Yeah,
It should
on
be
the website.
everywhere.
Yeah.
But at a minimum, it should be before the show starts so that people have a minute to breathe into that. Like people just need a minute for that. So I was, even as it was happening, I was just like, wow, I can't believe they did that without telling anybody.
So wait a second. So if we had, let's pretend we are the movies, which I tend to do with opera. Let's pretend we're the movies. So in the movies, there is a system, and it tells you in no C17, blah, blah, how many operas.
They're not rated.
Yeah, no. But let's say we had a rating system.
How many operas would be rated like PG-13?
How many are X?
How many would make it?
It depends on the director and some,
Right.
Like, is it an X-rated production or not?
But the content, I mean, most operas, the content is incredibly sophisticated. So, but
yeah, I mean, it would say, suggestive, blah, 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 language, smoking, murder, blood, incest. I mean, it's
Right.
like
Drinking scene. Yeah.
But we can do that. Like movies did it. It's not hard.
Yeah,
we
we can
have
do it.
super titles,
Yeah.
literally, like we're projecting stuff at people. You can put stuff on a web, and I think some companies do put that stuff on a website. So that concerned me. Just because, I'm thinking about the industry as a whole and the ways in which we try or do not try to be hospitable. And something like that can alienate a potential opera fan or an ongoing opera fan for a very long time if you get traumatized or re-traumatized by seeing a show. So
yeah, I'm also brought back to what Michael Spire said on our last show. Talking about opera being an art form that's meant to provoke and to change. And the idea of sort of damping down the shock seems almost antithetical to his idea, not my idea, but his idea, his definition of where opera came from, that it is meant to be shocking and a little upsetting.
I find that I don't think that having a trigger warning about what you're going to see on stage in any way mitigates the provocativeness of something, right?
Yeah.
So just being emotionally prepared, okay, there's violence in this movie. I know that's coming. But does that make the violence scene any less provocative? I don't think so. I think you're just in the right frame of mind to receive. If you're not in the right frame of mind to receive, you're not going to be provoked. You're going to be alienated, right? And so it's about creating a space that feels safe and putting people in a brain space where they can process what's happening. Because if you don't, then you just get walls and possibly trauma or upsetness or whatever.
I think it's interesting. I've never heard anyone suggest it before. I think it's an interesting idea to have that kind of content warning, because I've never seen any of that on any opera I've ever gone to.
They usually
warning, flashing lights.
Yeah, they'll announce things that flashing lights or gunshots or something. There'll usually be something, either an announcement, like a verbal announcement, or there will be something in the program that says it's coming. So I see something like the representation of childhood sexual assault as easily as upsetting, if not more so, than hearing a gunshot.
Right. I've seen it in Broadway programs where they say there are flashing lights in this, blah, 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 blah. And I remember when I saw Spider-Man, I remember it had it, but I've never seen suggestive content warnings before.
Well, they should really do that now, because
it's a good idea.
Something like Fire Shut Up in My, that someone could bring their children to that. I mean, it's like, it's such a, they're inviting a whole new community to come in and getting people excited to be a part of it. I wouldn't be surprised at all if people brought kids to that. So they should let you know, especially if it's a new opera.
That's interesting. So Brooke, have you had anyone else bring that up to you about Fire Shut Up in My Bones?
When I was, talking with my friends at the show at the time, we talked about it. And, I think the variety of responses are represented by the three of us right now. That I was like, I really think that if we're thinking in terms of making people feel comfortable enough and safe to receive the message of the art form, then we need to be respectful of the fact that we all come to the table with all sorts of complicated traumas and whatever. And it's not about mitigating the pain. It's about creating the right space. Some people, were not bothered, they just didn't notice it, or they hadn't really thought about it. But most people, I can't think of anyone who would think it was a terrible idea to say, hey, this stuff happens in this show. That's right. You're trying to reach out to a larger audience. Even with older operas, if the idea is we're trying to recruit new people to come and see opera, they don't know what Carmen is. They might, they'll recognize the music because how could you not? But they don't know what the story is necessarily. They don't know that they're going to watch a man violently murder a woman on stage. And it is violent.
That happens in a lot of operas.
Yeah, and but if you're, that could be very, very, very upsetting to people.
Yeah.
In ways that I don't think that we've thought about. And I think that a lot of people are alienated from a lot of art because there's not a sense of care for the audience's experience. And I think that's really what it's about.
New operas are going in some really crazy dark places, like Angel's Bone, or there's a scene in that where they saw off the wings of the angel.
Oh, it's awful.
There's or 448 Psychosis.
Right.
That was all the stuff in the Prototype Festival. That stuff is getting really dark now.
Yeah, and I just think just let people know.
People know, yeah.
It's never, you see it at the beginning of every single movie you watch on any streaming service, and it has never in any way hurt my experience of seeing the movie.
Like Dog Days, this made me uncomfortable. Dog Days really knocked me on my ass. It was so unbelievably graphic, and I don't know. I'll mention there's literally cannibalism, and there are people coming on stage with body parts, and there's a baptism with someone. She pees in a bucket and then washes her mother's corpse. It was just, and the music also piled on top of it. That was making my brain explode.
Right. And I think there's something to be said too for the fact that this is the Metropolitan Opera, so it's more mainstream in the sense of they have a bigger audience and therefore a bigger responsibility than a smaller theater that makes its money, does everything they do is intentionally provocative. If that's in your marketing, then that's a little bit different. And everything that you do presents you're gonna be shocked, right? But you don't necessarily, that's not what the Metropolitan Opera website is. It's
you think they're
very
not you think they're going to program Dog Days?
No. No, they're not.
No,
I
don't think they will.
Imagine
I don't
that
think
they would do that.
No.
That would be shocking.
I think that goes a little too far for them.
I think
I don't know. There's some pretty.
They might do a David T. Little opera. I think they would do JFK before they did.
They might commission
Dog
him to
Days.
write something rather.
They might commission him. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's already happening, but but there are operas like that being staged at major companies that are. I saw.
Well, Dog Days was at L.A. Opera, right?
Did they do it
not
at
on
LA
the main
Opera?
stage?
Oh, maybe
Yeah,
they did.
Was it? Yeah, I think it was. It might have been on a smaller stage. I forget.
I would be curious to see them stage it. It would be interesting. Anyway,
You mentioned earlier the orchestration of Fire Starve My Bones, which I agree with you. I felt like, especially during the first half of the opera, there was too much noise in the orchestra. And it was drowning out the singers.
Well, I remember someone told me on the way in that they asked him to bump up the orchestration. It just wasn't. It was too over orchestrated to understand what people were singing. But the moment that he thinned it out, it was just so incredible. And the musical language was so incredible. There was this. It was classical, but then it was jazz influenced. It was just. It was beautiful, beautiful. I want to see the smaller orchestration though. I would love to see
what they did in St. Louis. They did in St. Louis, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how orally what that would have been like.
I can't speak to that, but if you do a Mozart opera, it doesn't require the same
Yeah,
forces.
and the Baroque stuff too. I don't know why they felt they needed to do that, but I would definitely recommend seeing it. I mean, after the, like you said, after the frat scene, our audience just went nuts.
Yeah.
It was,
Why did they go nuts? Is it
because it is so good. Just like, you go to YouTube and you find these groups that have like coordinated and practiced these things that are like gymnastic.
Oh, yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
And then to have it presented there live, I mean, it was live.
And it was so specifically representative of that very specific experience. In my experience, I've only seen it in like movies or TV shows because I did not go to an HBCU. So, I think that seeing that on stage is really exciting.
Yeah, the only storytelling things that kind of sort of made me go, whoa, was the constriction of time within a single scene, like an entire relationship. They just met, and then they went through their whole arc of their relationship in one scene. So by the end, it was beautifully presented, but it's like, oh, well, now they've been together for months. It was like it was interesting to see it all happen so quickly.
Yeah, but it also, I feel like, so the opera, a lot of it was about his attachment issues, right? And you guys are men, so maybe your experiences have been different. But I have encountered men in my own dating life who would, after like a second date, they would be ready to like move in. Yeah. There's like and so I think that speaks to a certain kind of
I think that's just you, Brooke. People just get obsessed with you.
It's true.
It's not me. Because nothing about this says that's what's going to happen.
They're just fanatically. No,
but that is the thing that does happen, is that people who feel like they didn't get enough love as a kid will fall in love really hard, especially when they're really young and they haven't sorted themselves out, I don't you remember being in college and being like, oh my God, I'm so in love. And like, it's like you're like, that didn't happen to you, Peter?
No, I was weird in college though. I didn't I never dated. I'm still weird. I never dated anyone in college. And like, they were all sleeping with each other. All the straights and the queers, they were all like doing each other. And I was like, why are you, where,
wow.
Well, it's also,
what school did you go to?
Well, I came out in high school. So I went through my dating, early, gays have very little dating experience because it doesn't happen.
Wild oats in college.
Yeah. It like happens. You didn't get any practice in high school usually,
yeah.
So by the time they hit college, they're like amateurs. They've never dated before, But for me, I came out, I had a boyfriend in high school and blah. So when I got to college, I was like, all right, I'm going to focus on, learning the Baroque era,
Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was interesting. And, not saying I was a saint while I was there, but it wasn't I didn't go nuts.
But often it's just like they like don't know how to cope with growing up and being, and so they create this little codependency. So I just saw that, I was like, oh, that is definitely like that thing. It is that weird codependent can't magnet thing that you can't get away from, and it's not healthy and nobody's doing well, but but it's also an incredibly normal experience. Like, I feel like that is a thing that, like, it was very representative to me of like young neurotic love.
Yeah. And I mean, there was just sort of, it was so intense. There was so much, like the scene where the mother, all of a sudden she has a gun in her hand. It was like, she just reaches, oh, I'm going to go kill someone.
Thanks for spoiling everything for me, guys.
Oh no, that's not
I
the.
appreciate it.
And that doesn't even tell you anything.
That tells you nothing. But what I really loved, what I loved, the whole idea of just leave it in the road, the idea of you have all this stuff. Sometimes you just have to let things go.
Sometimes you gotta just leave it. You gotta just leave it alone. Sometimes you gotta leave it all behind. Lay your man down. No more softness. No more places for a man.
Have you ever heard that in an opera? Just let it go, That's like the opposite of an opera emotion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no one usually lets anything go in operas. It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
So what are they letting go of?
There's a million. All sorts of. It goes through several characters, but the idea of go over the top and kill them all, or just leave it in the road and walk away. That sort of idea of how far are you going to take this? How much damage are you doing to yourself by pursuing these horrible vendettas and realizing that's sort of what the whole opera sort of hinges on, that idea. But I love that it's like this mature human, interesting message, which I've never seen that in an opera. It's always the opposite.
Right. It was really it was an opera about what I consider to be like an extremely normal, modern, the trauma that all of us sort of move through life with, our attachment issues, our trust issues, our identity issues, our, all of these things that are they're very modern and very real for a lot of people. And it was really nice to see that represented.
Yeah. And I like that. It's really great that the Met is finally presenting something like that. It's African-American, blah, blah, blah. No, the human story, something that is that human. I love the idea that they embraced it and went for it. Right. And they got rewarded for it.
Right.
That's what I want the Met to realize. Yeah. They got rewarded. They got rewarded for doing the Philip Glass stuff. They got rewarded for doing the Exterminating Angel, the stuff that's not the classical repertoire. They were packed. All these productions. There is a hunger out there for new stuff.
But then they just keep going back to the
repertoire. Are we gonna really? Do we really want them to cancel the canon? Like, do we want them to not do Onegin or Bohème? Does that really? But is that actually what we want as the Met? Not like the Metropolitan Opera. What is its job?
No, you're right. You're right.
So. It should be doing new music. It should be doing lots of new music. It should be doing, but it also does need to do Bohème and Carmen and Onegin.
It does.
It doesn't need to do Bohème. It doesn't need to do Bohème. Please.
Bohème is a lot of people's favorite opera.
I know. And that needs to stop encouraging it. Listen, if a kid eats too much candy, you don't just keep giving them candy.
What's your problem with Bohème?
People come to New York only to see Bohème. That's like their Christmas,
Right. Why? What's wrong with Bohème?
What's wrong with Bohème?
Yeah, what's wrong? What's your problem with Bohème?
It has no gay people in it.
Well, it has no gay people in it. That's a good one. No, it isn't that.
What's your problem? It has snow? You don't like snow?
It's over before it starts. She's sick when she walks in the damn door. She's dead. She's a walking mummy.
But it's not.
Come on. Where is it going to go?
Story about their love.
Oh my God, she died. Come on. Sorry, I'm being stupid.
But that's not the story.
I know.
Stories about their love.
People who see it don't really care
Peter
about
hates love. Peter hates love. That's really what we're coming down to.
They just want that glorious Puccini. That's all they want. They
beautiful music. That's true.
Terence Blanchard even said today on NPR, he said, what is like the throes of romantic love, and that is such a huge thing that everybody deals with on some level. Like, it is so all consuming, and it is so human that, I think
never gets old.
No, because
It never gets old.
it doesn't. I would
'Cause
like
that-
for
yeah.
it to. Like, I would like for that to just be what, but it's not. It's like what it's the essence of humanity.
It is.
No,
Unfortunately.
I'm obviously kidding. I think Bohm's a masterpiece, but actually, but I do look at as like a piece of theater. I think that it breaks so many rules. The thing that's actually interesting about it is that it's kind of modern. The idea that the usual arc of a character, they kind of break it and it becomes an essay about love. There's various characters going through different kinds of love, and it almost doesn't have a story. It's almost just like a long meditation on love.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
I mean, I'm betraying my love of that opera, but
But it is a meditation on love, because there's real
Yeah.
friendship and real sacrifice and real, like, the sort of tumult.
sugar daddies.
Yeah,
Sugar
all of that.
daddies, yeah.
It tells all of those stories, which is and the music is great, and that
Yeah.
Mimi at the end like kills me every goddamn
it kills everyone. It kills everyone.
every time. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen that opera. Did
Yeah.
you guys read Matthew's article about Figaro?
No,
No.
I want to read it. Is it good?
It's so good.
So good. It's so good. And I wanted to talk to him about it, but we didn't have time. But I was just like, I've seen that opera a gazillion times. But it made me want to go back and watch it again.
I need to read it because I've directed that opera like 4 times. And
You're done with it?
No, I mean, I feel like I'm done with it. So I feel like I need a shot.
Yeah.
in
Oh,
the
you need
arm
an injection
of
I get it,
inspiration. So maybe he can give that to me.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really good. I mean, and he's intoxicating as a person just because he's so enthusiastic about the art form in general. Like, he just is so excited about it, and I find that to be very charming.
Yeah, it's cool how passionate he is about many operas.
He's also like 31.
Yeah,
He's so
I hate him.
young.
I hate him.
What is the deal? Yeah.
Damn him.
I mean, he's
31.
like, he's wise well beyond his years, which, not that I'm that much older than him, but still, it's
Yeah.
like,
Stupid, sexy wunderkind.
Yeah. Let's delete that episode. We don't want to show him to the world. We're too bitter. We're too bitter to show him. No.
Episode delete.
And she also, her writing is extraordinary.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing. She's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
She's one of the
I
best.
feel like I want to go like pick up everything that she's ever written and read it, because even just the little bits that I read from Smile, I was just like,
Yeah.
amazing.
It kind of killed me, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hard. I mean, it's so brave. It is so brave. All right, guys, I need to stop. It's getting late for me.
It's so
too.
nice to see you guys and to talk about stuff.
Yeah, missed you.
We should just have a little party where we just hang out.
Yeah, we can do that.
See you.
Bye, guys. It was great talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.
So we'll-
This episode of the Indie Opera Podcast was recorded on Zoom with co-hosts Walker Lewis, Peter Zepp, and Brooke Larimer, and our special guests Sarah Ruhl and Matthew Aucoin. Our show is created with the support of Business and Operations Manager Brooke Larimer, Associate Producer Chuck Sachs, co-hosts Ashley Renee Watkins and Walker Lewis, Jonathan Blaylock, PR Consultant, Gregory Moomji, Web Correspondent, and Rosha Kriyan, our theme song creator. This episode was edited by Peter Zepp. Thank you for watching.